Srimad Bhagavatam, translated, commentaries, by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Canto 1, Chapter 10, Departure of Lord Krishna for Dwarka. Text 18. Uddhava and Satyaki began to fan the Lord with a decorated fan, and the Lord, as the master of Madhu, seated on scattered flowers, commanded them along the road. Text 19. It was being heard here and there that the benedictions being paid to Krishna were neither befitting nor unbefitting, because they were all for the Absolute, who is now playing the part of a human being. Purport. At places there were sounds of Vedic benediction, aiming at the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. The benedictions were fitting in the sense that the Lord was playing the part of a human being as if a cousin of Maharaj Yudhisthira. But they were unfitting also because the Lord is absolute and has nothing to do with any kind of material relativities. He is nirguna, or there are no material qualities in him, but he is full of transcendental qualities. In the transcendental world, there is nothing contradictory, whereas in the relative world, everything has its opposite. In the relative world, white is the opposite conception of black, but in the transcendental world, there's no distinction between white and black. Therefore, the sounds of benedictions uttered by the learned Brahmins here and there appear to be contradictory in relation with the Absolute Person. But when they are applied to the Absolute Person, they lose all contradiction and become transcendental. One example may clear this idea. Lord Sri Krishna is sometimes described as a thief. He is very famous among his pure devotees as the Makkanchor. He used to steal butter from the houses of neighbors at Vrindavan in his early age. Since then, he is famous as a thief. But in spite of his being famous as a thief, he is worshipped as a thief. Whereas in the mundane world, a thief is punished and is never praised. Being the absolute personality of Godhead, everything is applicable to him, and still, in spite of all contradictions, he is the supreme personality of Godhead. Text 20. The ladies on the roofs of all the houses of Hastinapura, who were all absorbed in the thought of the transcendental qualities of the Lord, who is sung in select poetry, began to think of him. This talk was more attractive than the hymns of the Vedas. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita it is said that in all the Vedic literatures, the goal is the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Factually, the glories of the Lord are depicted in such literature as the Vedas, Ramayana, and Mahabharata. And in the Bhagavatam, they are specifically mentioned in respect to the Supreme Lord. Therefore, while the ladies on the tops of the houses in the capital of the kings of the Kuru dynasty were talking about the Lord, they were more pleasing than the Vedic hymns. Anything sung in the praise of the Lord is Shruti Mantra. There are songs of Thakur Narottam Das, one of the acharyas in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, composed in simple Bengali language. But Thakur Vishwanath Chakravarti, another very learned acharya of the same Sampradaya, has approved the songs by Thakur Narottam Das to be as good as Vedic mantras. And this is so because of the subject matter. The language is immaterial, but the subject matter is important. The ladies, who are all absorbed in the thought and actions of the Lord, develop the consciousness of Vedic wisdom by the grace of the Lord, and therefore, although such ladies might not have been very learned scholars in Sanskrit or otherwise, still, whatever they spoke was more attractive than the Vedic hymns. The Vedic hymns in the Upanishads are sometimes indirectly directed to the Supreme Lord, but the talks of the ladies are directly spoken of the Lord, and thus they were more pleasing to the heart. The ladies' talks appeared to be more valuable than the learned Brahmins' benedictions. Text 21. They said, "Here he is, the original personality of Godhead, as we definitely remember him. He alone existed before the manifested creation of the modes of nature, and in him only, because he is the Supreme Lord, all living beings merge, as if sleeping at night, their energy suspended." Purport. There are two types of dissolution of the manifest cosmos. At the end of every 4,320,000,000 solar years, when Brahma, the Lord of one particular universe, goes to sleep, there is one annihilation. And at the end of Brahma's life, which takes place at the end of Brahma's 100 years of age, in our calculation, at the end of 8,640,000,000 times 30 times 12 times 100 solar years, there is complete annihilation of the entire universe. And in both the periods, both the material energy called the Mahatattva and the marginal energy called Jivatattva merge in the person of the Supreme Lord. The living beings remain asleep within the body of the Lord until there is another creation of the material world. And that is the way of creation, maintenance, and annihilation of the material manifestation. The material creation is effected by the interaction of the three modes of material nature, set in action by the Lord, and therefore it is said here that the Lord existed before the modes of material nature were set in motion. In the Shruti mantra, it is said that only Vishnu, the Supreme Lord, existed before the creation. There were no Brahma or Shiva and other demigods. Vishnu means the Mahavishnu, who is lying on the causal ocean, and by his breathing only, all the universes are generating in seeds and gradually developing into gigantic forms, with innumerable planets within each and every universe. The seeds of universes develop into gigantic forms in the way seeds of a banyan tree develop into numberless banyan trees. This Mahavishnu is the plenary portion of the Lord Sri Krishna, who is mentioned in the Brahma Samhita as follows. Translation. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the original personality of Godhead Govinda, whose plenary portion is the Mahavishnu. All the Brahmas, or the heads of the universes, live only for the period of his exhaling, after the universes are generated from the pores of his transcendental body. End translation. Brahma Samhita 558. Thus Govinda, or Lord Krishna, is the cause of the Mahavishnu also. The ladies, talking about this Vedic truth, must have heard it from authoritative sources. An authoritative source is the only means of knowing about transcendental subject matter definitely. There is no other alternative. The merging of the living beings into the body of Mahavishnu takes place automatically at the end of Brahma's 100 years. But that does not mean that the individual living being loses his identity. The identity is there, and as soon as there is another creation by the supreme will of the Lord, all the sleeping or inactive living beings are again let loose to begin their activities in the continuation of past different spheres of life. It is called Saptotitanaya, or awakening from sleep and again engaging in one's repetitive continuous duty. When a man is asleep at night, he forgets himself, what he is, what his duty is, and everything of his waking state. But as soon as he awakens from slumber, he remembers all that he has to do, and thus engages himself again in his prescribed activities. The living beings also remain merged in the body of Mahavishnu during the period of annihilation. But as soon as there is another creation, they arise to take up their unfinished work. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 8:18-20. The Lord existed before the creative energy was set in action. The Lord is not a product of the material energy. His body is completely spiritual, and there's no difference between his body and himself. Before creation, the Lord remained in his abode, which is absolute and one.